Hello everyone, this is the part 2 of chapter 19. So without further ado, let's begin. So now, Bighorn Sheep. In this exercise, you will use your understanding of natural selection to try to work out what has caused a change in the characteristic of Bighorn Sheep. The question also takes you back to work you covered earlier. It's important to be able to deal with questions that cover more than one part of the syllabus. Okay, usually they want you to think out of the box sometimes, but it's never out of the syllabus. It's just that they make the question seem really hard, when in reality it's not if you check the mark scheme. So that's how it is. They love to play with their brains, but yeah. So Bighorn sheep live on Rocky Mountain sides in Canada. The males have very large horns. The size of the horns is caused by their genes. So this is gene mutation, or you could say it's by the effect of their genes. So state one feature shown in the diagram in the drawing that is found only in mammals. So as you can see over here, it's just hair actually. There's nothing else. That one feature shown in the drawing, that it must be shown in the drawing that is found only in mammals. So of course it's hair. Name the part of a cell that contains genes. So of course nucleus is the one. And in which cells in the bighorn sheep's body will the gene for horn size be present? In which cells? Actually there are no specific cells. All cells in the human body have the same gene for the horn size. There is no specific cells that do not have these genes. All cells, since there are about like billions of cells in our body, all those billions of cells in our body have the same genes for that horn size. So yeah, I wanted to make you guys aware that, when they ask about featuring mammals, if the question is asking about shown in the diagram, shown in the drawing, okay, you have to only tell those features that you can see in the diagram given to you. You can't say that, well, mammals have mammary glands, so why can't I just mention that? Are there any mammary glands here? Do you see them here? No, right? So they want you to mention that feature that you can see on the diagram, not that feature that you can't see on the diagram. So it's gonna be here, right? So let's move on to the next part. I forgot to highlight the question, and right. So the hunters kill bighorn sheep and keep their horns as trophies. They kill the sheep with the largest horns. The graph shows how the average size of the horns in population of bighorn sheep changed in 1970 and 2005. So as you can see, in 1970, mean horn length was around average size of the horns in the population of a bighorn sheep. Average size. So the average size was near 70, then it even dropped more lower, but then increased for a while, but then it remained kind of constant, but still dropped, and now it's that low. It's like even less than 40 as well. So explain how hunting of a bighorn sheep could have caused the general trend showed in the graph. So now you see the question, explain. You just don't explain figures that you see on the graph. You just don't explain these figures. You have to explain your knowledge about the natural selection, how they survive and reproduce. And since a lot of these bighorn sheep are being killed, so there'll be less sheep to pass on that long size of horn to the offspring. So as a result, it's the offspring are gonna have short length of horn size. So you could see over here in the answer, there has been selection against the sheep with the largest horns. Sheep with smaller horns are most likely to survive and reproduce. The alleles for smaller horns are therefore passed on to the next generations more often than the alleles for larger horns. Over time, more and more of the bighorn sheep population have small horns, and the mean born length therefore decreases, right? So you have to use the idea of natural selection, survival of the fittest, and what specific genes are able to pass on. So now, part D. In summer, it may be very hot in the mountains, but in winter, it is very cold. Explain how the Bighorn sheep's sweat glands can help to keep them cool in summer. So basically asking how do sweat, like the sweat glands, how does it help the Bighorn sheep to remain cool? So as the temperature rises, the sweat glands secrete more sweat onto the surface of the skin. Okay, so like for example, if you're living in an environment of like 40 degrees or like 34 degrees, you're gonna sweat more. Okay, so the water in the sweat evaporates, taking heat with it and then cooling the skin surface. So basically, when the temperature is very high, so it causes your sweat glands to secrete more sweat. So when your sweat glands secrete more sweat, that sweat eventually evaporates, and when that evaporates, the sweat, it doesn't evaporate itself, it evaporates taking in with heat. So when it takes away heat with it, it cools down the skin surface, right? So explain how vasoconstriction can help to keep the sheep warm in winter. Oh yeah, before I move on, this question, how this sweat, or is not necessarily sweat glands, it can also be sweat. Okay, so it's pretty much a common popular question in this chapter about asking about sweat. How does sweat keep a human body cool, right? So explain how vasoconstriction can help to keep the sheep warm in winter. Vasoconstriction is the narrowing of the arterioles. This is a very important point to mention when they ask about vasoconstriction. That supply blood to the skin capillaries. This reduces the amount of blood flowing close to the skin. So obviously, when there's narrowing of the arterioles, there will be a reduced amount of the blood flowing to the skin surface. So it therefore reduces the rate of heat loss from the blood to the air by radiation. Instead, the blood is diverted to flow through deeper vessels. Okay, the blood flows through the deeper vessels, right, separated from the air, okay, by adipose tissue. So that blood, instead of going to the skin surface, it goes to the deeper vessels, so it gets separated from the air by the adipose tissue, which insulates the body and decreases the heat loss. So this actually you need to know how does vasoconstriction help. So this is how, one is sweating, how it helps to keep the organism cool, and vasoconstriction is how it helps to keep the organism warm in any cold weather or in cold places, or it could be in winter. So this is what you have to explain. First you have to explain what is vasoconstriction. Is the narrowing of the arterioles that supply blood to the skin, and this reduces the amount of, so what is the cause of the narrowing of the arterioles? It reduces the amount of blood flowing to the skin. As a result, there will be reduced heat loss from the blood to the air. So what's the alternative? So it goes through the deeper vessels separated from the air by the adipose tissue, which then insulates the body and then decreases heat loss. So when it's winter, you don't want heat to be taken away from your body. Taken away in the sense, you don't want heat to be lost from your body, because you want to keep yourself warm. So this is one way how the arterioles or the blood it helps to keep your body warm, right? So let's move on to the next one. Exercise 19.3, selective breeding for high milk yield. This exercise contains some real data about the effects of artificial selection to try to develop herds of cows that produce more milk than usual. You will need to use your knowledge of selection pressures and their effects to make sense of the data and suggest explanation of the results. For the very last part of the question, you need to think back to work you covered much earlier in your course. So in 1965, a long experiment was begun to find out if artificial selection could increase the milk yield of cows. In one set of cows, artificial selection for high milk yield was carried out in each generation. These were called the selected line. In the other set, there was no artificial selection. They were called the control line. Both sets of cows were kept under the same conditions. The mean milk yield from the cows that were born in each year of 1965 to 1990 was calculated. The results are shown in the graph. So the selected line mean milk yield per cow is actually higher than the mean milk yield per cow in the control line. So this is the year of the cow's birth. So part A, calculate the change in mean milk yield per cow between 1965 and 1990 for the selected line. So the value in 1990 is actually 11 and value in 1965 is 7.2, so the change is increase of 3.8 kilogram per cow. You just do the subtraction. And then for the control line is the same thing. 1990 is 5.8 and it's 7.2 as well. 1965, so the change is a decrease. It's a decrease of 1.4 kilogram. Selected line is an increase of 3.8 kilogram per cow. Don't confuse this, right? Okay, so now part B. Describe how artificial selection would have been carried out in this selected line. So only the cows that gave the highest milk yield would have been allowed to breed. So basically cows that have the highest milk yield would be allowed to breed. They would be bred with bulls whose female family members who also gave high milk yield. This would be done over several generations, like from 1965 to 1990. Okay, each time only choosing the animals giving the highest milk yield to breed. So how artificial selection would have been carried on the selected line? So basically those farmers that actually choose the highest yield of milk produced per cow, so they breed those cows and they breed those bulls with the cows and to give a high milk yield, and the same thing is done generation over generation, so you get a high milk yield to breed over many generations actually. But there are actually consequences for doing that, since it's not a natural way. The cows in return, they suffer a lot, they have lots of health diseases and all that. So part C, suggest a reason for the results of the control line. So we can only guess. There is no evidence to tell us why the milk yield fell. In this group of cows, all the cows were equally likely to breed, so perhaps it is just a chance that the mean milk yield fell over time. However, perhaps there is a disadvantage in having a high milk yield. For example, perhaps these cows were less healthy, as I said, in other respects, so they're actually less likely to have offspring. So basically those cows that have a high milk yield, as I said, they have, one is health problems, another is fertility. They don't have that high chances to give birth to more offspring actually. So the reason for having a control and why you have a control is basically to make the experiment more reliable, and yeah, and also there's actually no evidence for that, since they kept everything the same from the beginning. Sometimes it's also like a chance, it just happens, since the control line, it's not controlled by humans. Random cows, they breed with each other. So yeah. So in part D, the researchers also looked at the cost of health treatment in each of the two breeding lines. The table shows some of the results. So the health problem, mastitis, cost of treatment in selected line is 43, and cost of treatment in control line is 16. Lameness is 10, 6. As I said, artificial selection bred cows always have more maintenance cost. They have more health problems as a result. So yeah, so just an explanation for the results shown in the table. So why is it like this? So the selected line were the cows with high milk yields. The large amounts of milk in the udders may have increased the incidence of inflammation, and the heavy weight of milk they have to carry around may have increased the degree of lameness. When it's something to do with high milk yield, that means the milk is thick, it's more creamy, it's more thicker, and as a result it's more heavier. So cows, although they actually produce they give out milk, but when they have to produce it in their body, it occupies a lot of space, it's very heavy, so obviously it causes a pressure, and as a result it can cause inflammation on the udders of the organ in the cow, right? So yeah, this is about 2 marks question, you could say. And then the final part, which is this: state and explain one reason other than the health treatment cost why it would be more expensive to keep the cows from the selected line. Why it would be more expensive to keep the cows from the selected line than the cows from the control line. Okay, so basically, why is it more expensive to keep the selected line cows than the control line cows? So basically, they will need more food to supply the materials needed to produce extra milk. Obviously, if you want something extra in return, you have to give that individual or that organism extra. It's just like the same analogy applies to a human being as well. For example, you have a thin human being and then you have a fat human being. A fat human being requires a lot more food, a lot more energy, so they get more fat as a result. But a thin human being, if you give them very little amount of food, or just like they just can't eat much, so they remain thin. And but for the fat people who actually eat a lot, they put a lot of pressure on the organs because they eventually become obese and all that. So it's obviously not good. So this is how it is, and we're actually done. And this is how you can actually apply the analogy of a human being to an animal as well. It's pretty much hard, but first time when you see this question, just go blank, like what the hell do I write? But it's fine. It's pretty much normal. I was also like this. So yeah, this is how it goes, and we're done with the question paper. So if you have any questions, just ask in the comments down below, and if I deemed it necessary, I'll pin your comment and write. So I hope you have a good day. Bye.